Hello everyone, and welcome back to this week's video of the continuing series of the Warriors of Darkness. Just who were they and what led them down the path that brought them to be remembered as villains in the world of Final Fantasy XIV. This is part 5 of my series, so if you want to see parts 1 through 4, you can find the link down below in the description or at the end of this video. So today is going to be kind of the final video that we'll be doing, at least until 5.3 comes out. So this video is going to be centered around the final member of the original 4 members of the Warriors of Darkness, excluding Oddbert. So we will be saving Oddbert and Silva until after 5.3 because I have a feeling that their stories are not yet over. But let's move on, and this video is going to be called The Deadly Magus, and it tells the tale of the Magus of Darkness. Now, the Magus of Darkness was once a member of the Warriors of Darkness, though he was originally known as a Warrior of Light of the First. After arriving in the Source, he went under the alias of Nyelbert, to kind of match the naming conventions Elizans used on the Shard. After his death and eventual resurrection as a cardinal virtue, however, he was given the name of Phronesis. And in case you don't know, just like with all the other cardinal virtues, Phronesis is ancient Greek, and it's kind of a word for a type of wisdom or intelligence. It's more specifically a type of wisdom related to practical action, implying there's both good judgment and excellence of character and habits, sometimes referred to as a practical virtue. However, his real name was simply known as Nyelbert. Now, Nyelbert is identical in appearance to the Elizan from the original version of A Realm Reborn's openings, though with his attire blackened. Though if I have to be honest, really doesn't look too different. Funnily enough, though, there's been a bit of discussion before about wondering whether or not he was male or female, because before, when they were given voices, this is due to the original opening where we had a male Elizan out in the battle, but we also had a female white-haired Elizan later on, and this was kind of caused some discussion wondering which one it is. But Nyelbert is, as far as I know, definitely a male. Now, after he was turned into a Sin Eater, he remained most of his features with only his eyes kind of changing to that black and red, much like the others, and the plaster white skin that was surrounded by that ghastly white glow. Nyelbert was a pretty serious member of the group. He was kind of the strong, silent type who only speaks when he feels like he's compelled to, such as poking fun at one of the others or whenever he had some advice to give. He's the type to never say a word except to savage someone with one remark, and this could be due to years of self-isolation as he searched for a way to save his friend. Now, at first glance, he seems much like Estinian. He's much more of a loner, but he did seem to have a more playful side that he doesn't really let out much, because it's shown that he had a habit of making fun of Oddbert with Brandon behind their leader's back. So, on to his history. Nyelbert was born of one of 2 boys who were descendants of the Consortium of Powerful Mages. Now, the goal here was to master the art of opening portals to other worlds to summon creatures from the void. To that end, these mages, through careful arranged marriages, eventually resulted in Nyelbert and his best friend Tainor. Now, both of these children were born with great magical abilities, though it was suggested that Nyelbert was the more powerful of the 2. These boys were taught the arcane arts from an early age before they were used for dangerous experiments and opened up void gates. Sadly, one day, one of these experiments went horribly wrong, and one of them, Tainor, was sucked into the gap between worlds. Heartbroken and blaming himself for what became of his friend, Nyelbert vowed to find a way to save Tainor from the darkness. It is unknown exactly when his journey began, but at one point he does leave home and he sets out on a journey to find a way to reopen the Void Gate and free Tainor. Ironically, it seems that the only reason that the gate opened in the first place was with Tainor's assistance. So now, without Tainor's aid, he doesn't have the ability to repeat the trick. He's not powerful enough to do that. But he believed that with enough power, he could force a gate open. Eventually, his journey takes him to Renda-Rae, where he runs into Oddbert, who had already formed his group of 5 other heroes in the making, such as Silva, Renda-Rae, Lamette, and Brandon. Now, the reason that he ran into them here, of all places, was because they were hired to put down a terrible monster that was wreaking havoc in the mines. Now, this creature caused a massive cave-in at one point, which separated Brandon and Renda-Rae from the other members of the party, and forced Nyelbert to work alongside Albert, Lament, and Silva to be able to survive all this. Now, the four of them joined forces and were able to find and put a stop to the creature, but after slaying it, and he managed to claim his prize, which was a stone filled with immense power, which ultimately would have driven the beast to kind of destroy everything in sight. That's when the problems really started. Now, at first glance, this stone seemed to be the answer to all of his prayers. He could use it to open up a gate and save Tanor. However, what they did not know was that it seemed that all the ether that was part of this mountain had kind of congealed into one point to make this special stone. And without that ether, the mountain was starting to collapse. So in the end, he really had no choice. He had no choice but to sacrifice his only hope to save his friend once he understood that if he didn't give back the stone's ether, it could destroy the mountain and endanger countless lives. In the end, he knew he couldn't live with himself if he did that, and he couldn't sacrifice so many lives for the sake of one, so he destroyed the stone and released the ether back into the mountain, all the while with tears flooding down his face. After learning of his one-man crusade, Albert stretches out a hand of friendship and offers for him to join his group, and promises to stay with Nyelbert until they can find a way to return Tanor to this world. So that's kind of what they did. Nyelbert was the last person to join them, but it did seem that he grew very fond of all of them, like he developed a very powerful connection with each of them in his own way. Again, he was a man of few words. He was the strong, silent type. However, he kind of had that air about him that just one word from him would be enough to make you feel like an idiot. That's kind of the impression I got. So, after that, he began traveling with his new companions for quite some time. They traveled the realm as they sought the wicked and helped the innocent, and it did show that he had a much softer side than he liked to portray otherwise. And eventually they were able to kind of break through that hard outer shell and see a much more softer side that he otherwise pretended he didn't have. During their journey, though, they found out that there was somebody working behind the scenes and spreading all this misery across Norvant. And this was all coming from one person, the Shadowkeeper, someone who was orchestrating all these terrible events of misfortune from the shadows. And it was even suggested that the Shadowkeeper was the one who initially caused that whole incident with the mountain and stone. Once they realized this, they decided to change their goal to finding and slaying the Shadowkeeper to free Norvant from their grasp. Eventually, though, it seemed that they did track them down, but it was not what they expected. The Shadowkeeper turned out to be none other than their own Silva, who once they saw as a friend. After their battle came to a head, Albert was given the chance to slay Silva and put an end to this. However, he couldn't bring himself to do it. He couldn't bring himself to land a killing blow to somebody he still saw as a friend, even if they were the ones behind all of this. Instead, they decided to hunt down whom they started to see as the real villains, which were the Ascians, in this case Mitron and Lodrith, and put an end to them. Well, it ended all right, but not at all how they planned. With the Ascians' deaths came the flood, and they realized too late that their struggles to save the world actually ended up dooming it. So when Elidibus approached them and offered for them to spare their world from becoming erased by light by journeying onto the source, Nyelbert agreed with all the others. The thing was, as I'm sure that he was the first to realize this fact, that they couldn't go there physically, and so he allowed himself to be cut down by Albert and left his corporeal form behind as his soul was able to travel to the source. Just like with his comrades, he became a warrior of darkness, took up a new name, in this case of Nyelbert, in an effort to kind of blend in with this new world. Their goal was simple. Basically torment the beast tribes long enough that they resort to more and more desperate summonings and trigger a calamity. And I think that if they had enough time, they probably would have been able to succeed. Now, their goals at one point did end up switching from torment the beast tribes to slay the warrior of light. And so at that point, they kind of launched a trap. They waited for the warrior of light to come to them, which we duly did. And that's when they attacked them, like trying to at least make this as quickly as possible. Again, these guys are not evil monsters. They're not horrible beings who just want to see and destroy everything. No, they are just desperate souls who didn't really know what to do. Of course, as I'm sure that we know by now, the Warrior of Light of the Source and the other Scions were able to beat them back, which caused Urianger to step forward and reveal that he was the mastermind behind all of this. And he used them to kind of get together and offer up enough of their crystals to give back onto Hydaelyn, and then secure a meeting with the Word of the Mother, Minfilia. So when Minfilia appeared from the offering of crystals, she offered to take them back to the First and halt the flood. Nyelbert, just like the others, decides to take her up on this offer, and he returns home to help her stop the flood and sacrifices whatever's left of himself. Sadly though, that's not where his story ends. For decades after the flood, Volfrey discovered the bodies of the former Warriors of Light, who are now seen as villains who caused the flood, and resurrected them as the Cardinal Virtues. That was how Nyelbert became Phronesis, a powerful Sin Eater who could invoke compact dimensional portals that would swallow everything around them into the void, for his greatest desire was to one day find a way to save Tanor. Now, during all of this, like all of these years, Tanor did not die while he was in the void. He was kind of stuck in a sort of suspended animation. He claimed that he had been in a very deep sleep, and he could only remember like the suffocating darkness around him. However, it seems that something disturbing the rift between worlds ended up causing him to awaken. Now this is actually discovered several years after Nyelbert was resurrected as a Sin Eater and the Warrior of Light arrives in the First. Apparently, their teleportation between the worlds seemed to have been what awoke Tanor from his slumber, and he began calling out through the void that he was trapped in. A while later, after the Warrior of Light meets and joins up with the hunter named Sirig to hunt down Phronesis, they're examining one of the many portals that he had opened, trying to discover a weakness. As they examine the portal, the Warrior of Light hears Tanor's voice calling from inside the void. And thanks to their own magic, they were able to kind of reach out and kind of find him, or rather guide Tanor back. He was able to kind of see their light shining through the distance, and he was able to follow it all the way back until he was out of the void. Now, after he was out, he didn't remember anything. The only thing he could clearly remember was his name. So the Warrior of Light and Sirig kind of took him in to nurse him back to health. And it did take a while, but his memories did start coming back in bits and pieces, enough for him to at least recall what happened. Once they realized, though, that Tanor had the ability to kind of close those portals, they realized that they had the perfect key to defeating Phronesis once and for all. And so, a lot of the questline is actually devoted to helping Tanor get his memories back and improve his skills. So by the time that he finally felt that he was ready, he was much more confident in himself, and he felt that he owed it to his friend to at least try to save him, even though he believed that he was pretty much on his own in the world, which was to be expected because he's been trapped in that horrible darkness for 100 years. Thanks to Tanor's magic and the combined strength of both the Warrior of Light and Sirig, they managed to find a way to not only summon Phronesis whenever they called, but to also counter his portals. Tanor was conflicted over seeing his old friend being reduced to this, but he joins forces with both of his new friends to give Nyelbert the rest he deserved. Together, they finally managed to defeat him, and as he fell, the Warrior of Light collects the broken crystal of light, where Nyelbert's greatest regret lives on. His shade appeared before them, and confessed how he had always been searching for a way to bring Tanor back, and had always blamed himself for not being able to find a way to do so, and was convinced that Tanor must hate him and feel like he abandoned him. But Tanor knows that Nyelbert was not to blame for what happened, and he spoke words of forgiveness and comfort to him, hoping that somehow it could reach his spirit and free him from his torment. Although it is unlikely that Tanor's words were really able to reach his old friend, it seemed to have given Tanor the strength to move on with his life and accept what happened, and now he's able to focus on his future. Before the trio go their separate ways, though, Sirig offers for Tanor to join him as his partner, which Tanor happily accepts, believing that Nyelbert would approve of his choice to become a hunter and continue to aid people in need. And it's really after that that Nyelbert's story seems to end. We do see him one last time, though, at the very end of Shadowbringers, after the battle with Emix Selk. We kind of see him standing off to the side with all of his comrades as they wait for their long-awaited leader to return to them. Nyelbert is a man of few words, but fiercely loyal to those he saw as friends. Though he was seen as both stubborn and distant at times, he was still a good person deep down. He was always able to see the bigger picture and became a true hero when sacrificing the thing he desired the most for the greater good. The Archmage always strove for greater power, power to protect those around him, and never lost sight of what was important. Though he was unable to find a way to bring his friend back while still alive, his devotion was so great that it lived on even after death, eventually seeing through to his greatest wish to save his best friend. I think what Nyelbert's story tells us is that sometimes things in this world just happen, but you can't always be looking for someone to blame. Sometimes you just have to learn to accept things the way they are and never stop trying to make things right. And hopefully, wherever he is, he did hear Tanor's words and is finally able to rest in peace. Alright everyone, thank you all so much for watching. This was part 5 of my Warriors of Darkness videos, and I am so happy with how well they're going. Now, we have covered the first 4 members of the Warriors of Light, and so you can look up their videos down in the description if you want to see them, like I said before. And I've been uploading one of these videos per week for the last month, but we're still going to be taking a break for the next 2 weeks. I'm doing this because we still have both Oddbirds and Silva stories to tell, but their stories may not be completely over until after we see 5.3. So there is not going to be a new video next week about the Warriors of Darkness, and possibly not until the week after that, since that's going to be the release of 5.3. But once all of that is said and done, we will hopefully have a satisfactory ending for both remaining members of this group of tragic heroes. So, this I can promise you, the next video that I do about the Warriors of Darkness is going to be all about Oddbird's story, and that's going to be coming out, I think, probably the earliest would be the 18th of August, hopefully giving me plenty of time to not only finish up the main story scenario, but also to kind of put everything together here. Hopefully you're all looking forward to that. And if you have any other suggestions about any other characters that you would like to hear about, please let me know down below. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. Until next time, everyone, this is Fantasy Girl signing out.